Hi, I'm Ian Verrigan, and this is Entrepreneurship and You. For about 7 or 8 years, I gave this talk at Engineering Physics at UBC, and in the last couple of months, I've given this presentation a few times, so I thought I'd do a voiceover of it really quickly, just to give people a feel for it, and then you can look through the slides yourself. So I'm going to go back to the basic window, and here we go. So the agenda is, I start this with a Pecha Kucha talk, which gives a much better view of who I am and what I think entrepreneurship is, and it's a quick 6 minutes, and the link for that is in the description box below. And so that's the Pecha Kucha talk. And so my questions are, what is entrepreneurship? What's the purpose of a business? And I'm going to look at you, the process, customers, and the scorecard. And one of the main things that I focus on a lot about is the customer and how that alters what people need to do. So here we go again. Question and answers. Here's my answer. So what is entrepreneurship? Well, it's about radical change. For me, entrepreneurship is doing stuff that's 10 times better. I'm not talking about incremental change, which we do all the time. We try to improve things. I'm talking about changing the status quo and changing people's behavior in a really significant way. And so how do you do that? And so the how-to radical change is an introduction to Lean Launchpad, which I taught quite a bit of in the early 2012 through 2014, 15 at UBC. And here's some of the lessons that I've learned in that. So the plan is talk about your purpose, the process, the customers, the scorecard, and you, and how do you develop and learn about this. So your purpose is to create a customer. And that's what Peter Drucker says. There's only one valid definition of business purpose, and that's to create a customer. And so selling becomes superfluous. We want to know and understand the customer so well that the product or service fits themselves. And that's the aim of marketing. And so what's the process for that? Well, we start with a startup is a temporary organization in search of a scalable, repeatable business model. It's not a normal company. We're really trying to figure out what our product is and who our customers are. And if we get that, then we can start to treat it like a normal business. And so Steve Blank comes up with these 4 steps, and they're not really linear. You can see that there's this pivot where you cycle back. And so the first one is go out and discover who your customers are. And so that's customer discovery. And if you get some traction, sort of some consistency with customers, then you try to sell it with customer validation, and you see if you can make that a viable business. And often the business case isn't big enough at that point, and so you have to go back and rejig your idea and rejig your customers with customer discovery. And so you might loop through that first 2 quite a few times, 2, 3, 4 times. And if you get to the point where you get customer validation, well, then you go on to the traditional business type things and you execute on that business plan. And Steve Blank calls that customer creation and company building. And so the thing we all want to do is we want to hone in on something and get going. And that's the second half of the Steve Blank's process. And so we want to do this, but we're not ready to do that. At the beginning, we're searching for a business model. And so it looks like this. And yeah, it's not pretty, right? Search is not pretty. You're all over the place. You're doing things that are dead ends. But that's what's required at that point. And so what I like to talk about is because you're doing that, persistence, grit, and cheer are your friends. You got to find a way to be persistent, go down those down the back of those dead alleys and stuff like that, and just persist. So what about customers? Well, one of the things that we like to do in Lean Launchpad is we get you to draw out your day in the life of the customer. So who is your customer? And if you know, then prove it. And so we're doing a lot of sketching. And so one of the things you can sketch is a service or a product journey. And so most people say, well, I don't know who that is. Well, that's the point. You're sketching it out the first time so that you can fill in the blanks, so that mentors and advisors can see what you know and try to piece together what that service and product journey will look like. And we really want to know what it looks like before, like today, and then what it's going to look like after with your service or product in there. How are you going to change the world? And so here's an example of a first first draft sketch. And so the question I asked this team, which had a medical product, is does it get used in an ambulance outside of hospitals, or is it in the emergency room in a hospital, that requires critical care, or, is it in an operating room? And then who are the people, or who are the roles, and, who specifies for it and who pays for it? So, whose problem are you solving? And so that's kind of how you get through that first bit. A couple of years into this, Alex Osterwalder came up with a value proposition canvas, which sort of simplifies that day in the life down to some more tangible things that you need to do. So customers have jobs. So what are they trying to do, and how do you as a product provider fulfill those jobs for them? And they have pains and they have gains. And so how does your product or service fit with that? So this is just another view of helping you draw that day in the life in the customer. And how does your product fit within that? And so just another example of that, in Steve Blank's first book, he covers this MEM optics case. And so quickly, he wants you, when you're going to hospitals, to talk to doctors, patients, technicians, and hospital managers. And he really wants us to know who the people are. And so as a mentor, I'm really wary when people talk about generalities, like it's a hospital, or it's a healthcare, or it's a small, medium business. That implies to me that you don't actually know people in those places. And we're looking at listening to people and then generalizing and working from the ground up. And so in a customer workflow, it can look like something like this, where, there's all parts of a hospital in here. In this case, there's radiologists and patients and technicians and stuff. And the team and the company needs to be able to sketch out this customer workflow on how their product or service actually does something. And then it also needs to know how does it get paid. And in a hospital, the people doing the work aren't the ones that receive the pay. There's a whole other way of paying. And so you need to have both of these sets of research going. And so where does the customer get their insights and inspiration? And so when you're developing your marketing, or you're developing questions for these people, you need to know where they go to ask questions. And so in simplistic terms, here's a mind map of that. And so, you have to find where you need to be. Where does your customer show up? You need to show up there for them. And, here's another marketing view. So you need to turn up in medical journals, conferences, advocacy groups. Those are things that you eventually need to get to. You can also use those for learning about your customer and how to do a day in the life for them. So another thing is that when you're changing something, you're breaking something. And so the ecosystem that you're breaking doesn't necessarily want you to break it. And so that's why often a startup does things in small steps. It may be a 10x change of the, overall, but in the beginning, you're just doing these little things to be able to get in there, and you're going to break it, right? And so, a lot of people don't like the fact that when people tell them they're breaking it, but they are, and you need to get used to that a little bit, because it's quite hard to get over. Another thing is what kind of market are you in? And this is a little bit intellectual, but it's really important in the context of a university startup, because most universities, people come to entrepreneurship because they have a technology, right? And that technology, they want to sell it. And so it often doesn't have an existing market. There's not an existing market for it. And that means that you have to teach people how to buy it. And so you'll have to build kind of the first kind of thing with it. And so a simple example would be Chop Value, which is the chopstick recycling. They built these little squares of chopsticks and then, tried to get other people to come up with ideas for it, but no one did. And so one of the things that Chop Value did that was very cool was they just made little coasters, and they made wall art that they hung in the restaurants of the people who donated the used chopsticks. And it just showed that circular economy. And then from that, Chop Value had to build different other types of furniture and things like that to kind of seed the market for people to see what could be useful. So they had to teach people how to use that new technology, which was, a recycled piece of chopsticks. And we see it in all sorts of other, higher tech things where, you have to teach people how to buy. And unfortunately, as soon as you have to teach people how to buy, there's no money in it for quite a while. And so that's this new market thing that, we're trying to avoid. But, in a university context, that's typically where we start. And so you're going to be there or in a resegmented market. But you're not going to be in an existing market doing iPhone 13. Apple did the first versions of that, and they earned the right to do all the incremental ones. And that's the same for you. You're going to have to do that first one. And it may take you longer than, say, the iPhone and iPod, which took, 2 to 3 to 4 years before it really did anything substantial. So yours might even be longer. But that's kind of where you're at in terms of getting going. So the scorecard in Lean Launchpads is the business model canvas. And it's really good because it covers the whole business quickly on an 8.5 by 11. And in the university context, we're really focusing on the customer segments and the value propositions, customer relationships. And again, because most teams come at this from a technical perspective, this is the weakest part of their story. And so it's the part that needs the most work. And so we get people to go out and interview customers in that day in the life of the customers. The gaps in that day in the life customer diagram are where you need to go talk to people. And so every week, you come and you revise this document to talk about who your customer segments are, what your value propositions are, what's stuck and what needs to change. And so from your perspective, this is a list of, traditional entrepreneurial leadership things. And what you'll notice about all of these is that they're all soft skills. And I'm talking about people coming at this who are, just like Eng Phys kids, hardcore nerds, right? Or hardcore creatives. And one of the things that I want to say is that, in my experience is that hardcore nerds are really, really good at selling to other hardcore nerds. And if, you're not a phys kid and you're listening to this and you're a creative type, in your creative area, you're very good at communicating to other people like you. Now, in an engineering physics perspective, in an engineering sense, most of the customers are like yourselves. They're other hardcore nerds. And in that case, your soft skills and the way you like to communicate are perfect. And, because you're talking to yourself, you're uniquely qualified to do that. And where this kind of breaks down, in my experience, is if your engineering product is selling to consumers, something that you don't have domain expertise in. At that case, you're just absolutely the wrong person to talk to that customer. And you'll have to find someone to do that. And often startups fail early on because the engineering people try to talk outside of their domain of expertise, or creative people try to sell to engineers. It just doesn't work. So you need to learn with that day in the life diagram on who you need to talk to and how to talk to them specifically. And often your story, as your market size grows, will have to be specific to many parts of that day in the life diagram. So, this is good news for engineering kids. And so in the UBC Eng Phys case, they've really rocked in terms of market cap delivered to our province, right? In the TNET 20 over the years, this is old, but in the TNET 20, in the top 5 has always been 1, 2, or 3 Eng Phys led companies. And so, this is what I'm saying is that it makes sense, but also in the show me the money sense, UBC Fizzers have rocked and, do have good soft skills that are needed to do this. So you and the problems do evolve. And, so, what does that mean? Well, just coming back, this is Roger Martin, Design of Business, and he talks about this knowledge funnel. And so from a startup perspective, you start in the mystery zone. And you need to make something concrete out of that. And so the first one's quite simple. It's usually based on rules of thumb, and you make a product out of it, and you can make some money. But it's still a rule of thumb, and it's not kind of perfect. It solves somebody's problem, but it's not a big thing. And so the next thing is that you need to kind of make that algorithmic and be able to churn it out, and it fits perfectly. And it's great. And so the big skill here is taking something in that mystery zone and getting it to the heuristic zone and then productizing it. And then stuff from the heuristic zone, working through that and, getting it into the algorithmic zone and productizing it even further and bigger, right? So if you take a look at, say, like the Apple iPod, the beginning was, this music player. It came out, it kind of worked. It needed 2 or 3 different generations, and then bam, it worked, right? And it just, went really big. And I'll show you some of the numbers as we go along. But that's kind of the example. You go through these stages. And so in summary, no one knows the answer. You've got to discover it by being in the game and doing the work and, being useful. And so you need to act, you need to review and learn, fix and adjust. And basically you be persistent, be gritty, and have fun. And really this is all you need to know. And so notice that I didn't talk about technology today. And I'm really big on people and technology. So from an engineering physics perspective, your deep technical knowledge allows you the opportunity to solve people problems with technology. People buy things, not, technology doesn't buy things. And so you're selling to other people, and that's the key. You need to be able to use your deep tech knowledge or your creativity to connect with someone, show them you live in their world, and show them that you're changing their world in a good way. And that's really, how you change the world from a Lean Launchpad perspective. So that's the end. There's a couple of little more I want to talk about: persistence, grit, and cheer. They're your friend. And from a school perspective, how does Lean Launchpad and the type of things that we're talking about here fit with a business school curriculum? So business school curriculum is shown on the right here, and it fits with the second side of that customer discovery thing. It's when you have a company, there is money in it, you know who your customers are, and you're really executing. And then traditional business school curriculum works really good. On the left-hand side, this is all the points of, taking innovation and creativity and making that product and finding a customer who actually wants that product and, doing the search bit, right? And so the left-hand side is a search, and that's what we focus on in Lean Launchpads. And most technology incubators work through this side to be able to get to the point where you have a business. And so that's how you have this dance between the left-hand side and the right-hand side, right? And so on the left-hand side, you definitely have a lot more creative type of engineering. And on the right-hand side, you have a lot more product engineering and finance to be able to get stuff out, right? And so here's the example of the iPod. And this is what I mean in the timeline, the 1G class that came out in 2002, and all these products came out, right? And that's one way of looking at it. But here's the shipments and the money, right? And so you can see that it really wasn't until 2005 when we got into the 4G iPods where the money really started to come in, right? And it took until 2008 when it started peaking. So 6 years, right? And the other thing is that with the iPod example, that's how hard is this kind of stuff. Legend has it that the first product manager of the iPod quit way back in 2001 or 2 because he didn't think it was really going to work. And so, at that time, it didn't really look like it. So, really, there's no such thing as instant success. So, I think I'm going to stop there, and thank you for listening. And if you want to know more about the slides, they're in the description box below. Thank you. Bye.